I just wanted to say a couple of words and ideas, because I'm sure people are very curious, about Tuesday, the midterm elections. I thought it was appropriate just to say a couple of ideas, because people are probably wondering what happened, right? Because the Democrats won the House. So the question is like, how do we understand that, you know? But the truth is, when I will explain to you why, but the truth is the fact that the Democrats won the House is really very good. It's very good for the whole concept, the whole process. It's really very important. Why is that? We have to understand that the main idea, which I've been saying for a long time, is that in the end, Esav, and today's actually the Parsha told us, in the end, as I pointed out many, many times, there's a lot of shurim devoted to that, in the end of time, before the Mashiach comes, Esav does tshuva. What does that mean? That means originally who was Esav? He was a tzaddik, as I mentioned. You know, he was a twin brother to Yaakov. As such, he had the same koiches, the same abilities as Yaakov. In fact, Rashi says, until they were 15 years old, you could not tell them apart. Obviously, they were equal in many, many ways. You know, in terms of their capacities and their abilities, they were tremendously equal and so on, you know. And of course, we know Esav, of course, became a Rasha. And in the end, what happens is, and I brought the Medrash, which the concept of Rivka going to finding out what's happening, because there was a tremendous amount of conflict, where it says, Rav Ya'avoid So'ir, right? Rav, the older, will serve the younger. And I mentioned that Ya'avoid, the Medrash says, can be read as Ya'aved, because in the Torah there's no punctuation. So in the beginning it really should have been Rav Ya'avoid, that the older will serve the younger. But of course he became a Rasha. So therefore his path in helping Yaakov was no longer Ya'avoid, where he was served, assist Yaakov to do the tikkun, to rectify the creation. Instead, he would now assist Yaakov in Ya'aved by persecuting and oppressing Yaakov, which means to bring the suffering, which is another form of tikkun. So that we know. So what the Marsha wants, obviously, is that Esav does tshuva. But what does that mean? In order for Esav to do tshuva, Esav, you have to preserve Esav. Esav has to survive. Now, I had mentioned many times, of course, that America is what's called the Tov Sheb Esav, the good part of Esav, right? And Trump, Donald Trump, in many ways, is a messianic figure of Esav, of Edom. Edom is Esav, and so on. And he is the individual that is the personification of Esav, and we see what he's doing, which is incredible. He's assisting Israel, confronting the world. He's doing exactly what Esav would have done, which I had mentioned a while back in the Shir on Kavanaugh, from the word Ish Sadeh, for a man of the field, which means that Esav is going to confront the world, because Sadeh means a field, means the entire world, and so on. And he confronts them in many ways, and so on. But there was a major problem, and I feel that the Rebbe Shem stepped in, so to speak, to solve that problem. Not totally, but it mitigates the problem. What was the problem? You know, there's a halacha that when you go to war against an enemy, don't corner him, which means don't get him in a way where he's cornered, right? Which means that he has no exit. He can't get out. He's cornered, right? There's a halacha, you can't. You need to leave him with a way to run away. When Jews make war, you can't leave the enemy, whoever they're fighting, with no exit or no escape route. Why? Because it's interesting. As long as a person thinks that he can escape, right? So he will fight with a certain amount of energy, right? Why? Because he knows that worst comes to worst, I can retreat, right? because there's a way to retreat. But what happens if you corner an enemy and he has no escape? He has no escape route, you know. So all of a sudden he realizes he's finished. The only way he can survive, he must kill you, you see. So in other words, the only way he can survive, if he's not cornered, he can run away. But if he's cornered, then he knows he cannot survive, he must kill you. So automatically, he will get an incredible, what's called an adrenaline rush. He will become tremendous energy, far more than probably normal, because he knows the only way to live is to kill you. That is why you need to leave some type of an escape route for your enemy. You see, he needs to think that he can survive without, right, having to kill you, because he can flee. It's a very important concept. It's a beautiful understanding psychologically of how people operate when they're threatened. You see, there was a big problem happening in America. America's split. I mean, it's really split. You have on one side, you have the, let's say, the Republicans, conservatives, right? Those people who want to maintain a certain status quo, and so on. You know, on the other side, you have the left, the liberals, and the Democrats. You see, and there's a tremendous split ideologically or politically between the two. The problem is that we were witnessing the beginning of tremendous, what's called political instability and violence. That's what was happening. You had major political figures come out and do what? And say, you got to kick them back. I mean, this guy Eric Holder came, the former Attorney General, says, yeah, you got to kick them back. And even Hillary came out with a remark and so on, you know. In other words, you were beginning, and this Congresswoman, Maxine Waters, which is incredible, you were beginning to see not just differences, but violence. They were now advocating violence. Why? Because if you think about it, they had no other recourse. In other words, they did not have the House. It wasn't theirs, it was Republican, and they didn't have the Senate. Both of these, the House and the Senate, the majority were Republicans. You see? And the president is a Republican, and the Supreme Court is now Republican. In other words, they had no representation whatsoever, you see, to bring forth their ideology. What happened was, after a while, is they became desperate, you see. And because they became desperate, they had no escape route. You know, they had no legal representation whatsoever to assert and to state their case, which means they became desperate. So what happened is an ideological split actually became violent. And that's very dangerous, you see. I'm not saying there would have been a civil war, but there's no question that had they lost the House, they would have no escape. They have no way, right, to represent themselves in any political way. You see, so what would have happened is they would have become much more violent. And you never know what that does to America. That's how rebellions begin, you see, where there's a tremendous ideological difference between groups. And when one group feels it has no other means but to be violent and overthrow, that's what they do, you see. So there's no question that had the Democrats lost the House, and this would have continued again with everything being Republican, once they began down the path of violence, there's no question that it would have got worse. But if it gets worse, that's very bad for Esav, you see, because that threatens the whole what? The whole ability of America to function and to help the Jewish people, which is what Trump is doing, you see. So if you think about it, there was a tremendous wisdom in what's called throwing them a bone. It's a decoy. That's what the Baruch Hashem did. He said, wait a minute, you guys are getting too excited. Here's what I'll do, you know, I'll give you the House. They say, well, you give them the House, so that's going to be problematic. Not really. I'll show you how. Okay? First of all, the Senate, and the majority, of course, of the Senate is Republican. The Senate is the one who determines the Supreme Court nomination, not the House. They do it by themselves, you see. And the morality of America comes from the Supreme Court. That's the whole morality. The whole content, and I mentioned in a previous year, that in many ways America, right, that America is what's called chayav misa. Why? Why is that? Because first of all, from the Supreme Court came the whole concept of gay marriages and gay rights. That's against the Torah. It's a death sentence in the Torah. So that's number one. The second thing is Roe versus Wade. It's ritzicha. They kill partial birth abortions, right? They can kill a kid, I think in the 9th month, they can kill the kid. That's murder. So America is actually practicing, right? And it's been legalized by the Supreme Court. You see, they are committing murder, right? And homosexuality, which is both chayav misa, subject to the death penalty in the Torah. You see, so the morality of America in many ways comes from the Supreme Court, and therefore the Supreme Court remains what it's going to be. It's already conservative, you see, and the Senate is the one that votes that, so that will remain. You see, the concept of morality. Also, it is a Senate that confirms judicial appointees, and they are responsible for justice. So that also remains in America to do that which is righteous. And I mentioned that one of Trump's job is to make America more righteous. I mentioned that in the Kavanaugh and so on, you know. Besides that, a great deal of what Trump does, right, is not through the Congress. It's through executive orders. And that remains. Whether he has a house or not, that will remain, you see. So a great deal of what he does, you see, will be intact. Therefore, what the Marsham did to preserve America, in that sense, he threw them the house, let them have the house. But that's not really where the real power lies. Like I say, the real power in terms of the justice and morality lies with the Supreme Court and the judicial system. And also Trump is able to do what he does anyway because he does it through executive orders, you see. So it's my belief that this is really, in that sense, what the Rabbi Shem did. He gave them the house, you know. So that's not the main idea. And besides, we know that, you know, what's her name? Ginsburg, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, right? I think she fell and broke 3 ribs. I mean, she's not doing very well. She's an old woman, 85 years old. She's not going to quit. Why? Because she knows that if she does quit, then the next judge is going to be another conservative, right? So you can, in that case, you already have 4 or 5, you know, and then if she quits or however, he will appoint a conservative, and then you'll have how many? 6 conservatives against 3. If you want to see a meltdown of the Democrats, if she goes, if for whatever reason, either she doesn't survive because she's an older woman.
She survived cancer already.
Yeah, I know, twice. I know. But it's not up to her. God determines life. But if the Moshe wants to take her out and allow another conservative, then you are going to witness a meltdown by the Democrats. Because the real power lies in the Supreme Court and in the judicial system in terms of morality and justice. And the Moshe wants to make America the Tov Shebesav, in a certain sense, righteous, you see. So we're going to take a look at what happens in the future in terms of the Supreme Court, but in a certain sense what the Moshe did was very good, because he allows the Democrats, now that they have a legislative way that they can express their agenda, so they simmer down, you know. It mollifies them. You see, it removes a lot of the rage and the anger and so on. What was that?
Takes the edge off.
Takes the edge off, yeah, because now they have the house.
And they're still upset.
Oh yeah, but at least they're not going to start with the violence because now they have the house. In other words, their anger can now be expressed through the house and not through throwing somebody out of a restaurant or whatever, because it would only get worse. It would only get worse. So when you think about it, that's incredible wisdom of what the Moshe did, you see, because ultimately he wants to preserve the America, you know, and God forbid that there should be something like a rebellion or a civil war or whatever, because they were really losing it. They were really losing it and so on, So in that sense, it was a really, it's a plus and a benefit to the entire agenda of trying to make America righteous, helping Israel, and so on.
He fired Sessions immediately.
What was that?
And he fired Sessions right after.
Yeah,
So
and of course,
we're predicting that.
yeah, he didn't. Well, he didn't. Well, what he did, he said, Sessions, you need to resign. He resigned, which is the more honorable way to leave. But of course, or else he would have fired him. No question about that. And that's and of course, he's gonna put in a attorney general that's, of course, far more loyal and makes sense. The guy's not gonna recuse himself. It's unfortunate because Sessions really is a good guy. He's a very decent guy. He's a good guy, but he really made a terrible mistake by recusing himself. I believe the reason why he did, one of the people don't understand why he did, but I believe the real reason why he recused himself is because he was shaken up, because the Congress called him, they accused him of having collusion with the Russians, when really all he did was speak to the ambassador or whatever, which is normal, but the fact that he was so shaken up, he realized that, that if he's going to remain involved in the Russian collusion business, who knows? They can call him and really take him apart, I believe it was fear that the reason why he recused himself, because he was tremendously afraid, because he realized that if he continues in that line, who knows what they could do to him, They can put him in prison, you never know, and he does not want to face that. So he just said, I'm out. He recused himself. But the problem was, of course, you don't do that. You're the Attorney General. And then once he did that, he basically fell apart. He just had nothing to do. All these things with Mueller going after him, he just threw in the towel and says, I'm out of here, So he just did his other stuff. But the main thing Trump needed is where's my Attorney General? Not because he's bound by the president, no. But he wasn't even defending justice. Why do you recuse yourself? What are you talking about, And then there's so many people that committed crimes, leaks and crimes. I mean, it's all over the place. He did nothing, which is astounding. So I believe he just fell apart. And that was it, Tragic, but I believe that's what happened. But in any case, I think that's really what happened in terms of why the Democrats won the House. It was very good. Preserves America, takes the edge off, as you said, and it removes all the tremendous, it mitigates all the tremendous hostility that they have. Not that they're not angry, but they have a way of expressing it. They have an escape route, you see, and therefore it won't be lahashmod lahareg, as they say, to kill, to destroy the Republicans, throw them out, whatever, and so on. Anyway, that's what I feel is really going on. So, so what? Okay. There's a second idea which I think is important. And I think what Trump has to realize, you see, is that he can be, that his power base, he could be threatened. He lost the House. That tells him something, He's not, his whole sense of security that he'll never lose any authority, power, is shaken, So I think what God is doing is warning him, don't mess around with Israel with your peace proposal. I think that's what it is. It's also a warning to tell him that, listen, and so on, don't put Israel at a tremendous disadvantage when you come out with your peace plan. It's also part of the reckoning and calculation and so on, Anyway, any questions? That's what I want to say, my take on this midterm elections.
It's also the media is also mollified to a certain degree, because especially since they made a lot more of the victory than it actually was.
Yeah. Well, this whole concept of a blue wave was not with nonsense.
What blue wave?
What blue wave is right? It just shows you they're all a bunch of liars. No, it's always a lie. I mean, they won, but how much of a majority did they have? I don't know how much, but it's not significant. No, it's like a blue wave.
Chart of all these presidents, Clinton, Bush, all these people.
They lost far more. Oh yeah. Well, what's his name? Obama. He lost 63 congressmen. You believe this? What a slaughter! And they all lost. Even Bill Clinton lost, and so on and so forth. That was a blue wave. And so on. But anyway,
Trump
a red
said
wave.
at the press conference that he made history. He's the first president.
He had the lowest turnover.
Right in the midterm after he was first elected.
Yeah, because they always lose in the
They're still
midterm.
hostile to a certain extent because that whole Acosta business.
Oh wow.
was
Yeah.
hostile.
Yeah.
They want
He
to
was hostile right
say
back, but-
they're not going to stop.
No.
They're not stopping.
Those attack.
They're
No.
going to try to.
But at least there won't be physical violence. See, that's what was happening.
They attacked the house of the Fox News host.
The what?
Fox News.
Yeah.
They attacked his house when he wasn't home.
Oh yeah, Tucker.
Tucker, right?
Yeah, Tucker Carlson.
Who?
He's a commentator, Fox commentator.
They attacked
They
his.
attacked his house.
What
They
did
attacked, I don't know if they attacked his house. I don't know
Yeah,
details.
Yeah.
they're
They broke down
banging
the
on the door.
I mean, the Democrats did that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's violence.
Antifa, they call it.
Yeah, that's violence.
Yeah.
That was the problem. It was
Wasn't there-
beginning.
His wife and kids were there.
Okay, whatever, but that's exactly what this was aimed to prevent. That kind of the beginning of rebellion and violence. And now they're not going to do it. What's the point? Just get your guys in the house to do something, And I like the way he told them, you're going to investigate me, then the Senate's going to investigate all of you guys. You know what I'm saying? Which he's right. What is this, a game?
She said, I'm better at it than you. You won't stop. That's what he
Yeah.
said.
Oh, yeah. He'll go after them. Yeah. The whole thing's absurd.
It's just so
What you can't believe that grown men who have this type of position of power and responsibility, they're acting like a bunch of kids. You can't believe this, Let the guy govern, Let him do something. He's doing very well. What is this? Getting revenge? You're going to go into his tax records? I mean, the whole thing makes no sense. All it is revenge. It's a bunch of kids that are seeking revenge. The whole thing, you should know, it's an embarrassment. That whole Congress is an embarrassment, that they're even acting like children and so on, Well, I mean, you go after the guy. It's unbelievable how they're acting. Where's the country? Do something for the country. Forget about exacting revenge on Trump. The whole thing is nonsense. So imagine the House is going to attack the Senate, and the Senate's going to attack the House. That's the end of the American government, I personally think that's the worst thing they could do for themselves, because everybody's going to see, hey, this is crazy. Whatever happened to the people? You're supposed to govern the people, not take revenge. Now, what is this, a vendetta? What is this, the Hatfield and the McCoys, which is the legendary vendetta. And so, what is this? Whatever happened to the government? What happened to the people? And so on, It's just, it's like a circus. What can you say, Well, look, somebody had to replace Barnum and Bailey because they don't exist anymore, right? So now it's the U.S. government. What can you say, it's a terrible embarrassment that these people are acting this way, Okay, that was my take on, what's happening with the midterm elections and so on.